Okay, my name is Heather. I'm a physical therapist. I'm going to talk about how to advance different exercises from a little bit easier to a little bit harder. There's multiple ways, and just bear in mind that sometimes as we advance an exercise, we may be working on a different muscle, just compared to the more traditional way. So you will very quickly, depending on how hard it is, figure out what muscles you're working, and you might get an interesting lesson in anatomy as you go through some of them. Always be careful in that you don't want to do something faster than you're ready for. So today I want to focus on the squat because it's a pretty standard exercise, pretty easy, and it's a really good way to get a lot of quad strength and some glute strength, and it is very easy to advance so that it's no longer a basic exercise and you can make it as hard as you want, really. It's up to your imagination. So the first thing I want to discuss is just the proper form for a squat. So whether I'm doing a what we call a mini squat where I'm just bending a little bit, or I'm doing a full deep squat, I want the movement to come from both my hip and my knee to be able to be almost symmetrical in the amount of movement. So if I bend too much at the hip, I end up getting this. And then I'm just kind of bowing. If I bend too much at the knee, then I'm sinking and it's putting a lot of pressure on my knees. So you really want to make sure that it's fairly equal. I always tell my patients, imagine that you're sitting back in a chair. So if you're bending properly, you'll be able to sit directly into your chair. If you're bending only at the knee, which is a lot of people do, then you'll miss your chair altogether. Okay? So again, the easy version of it is going to be just a mini squat. The harder version is going a little bit deeper. Only go as deep as you can and still keep the control to be able to come back up without having to toss yourself up into the air. That's more using momentum than necessarily the muscles. So that's just one thing to be aware of. To make any exercise harder, one of the easiest ways we can do is add a dynamic surface. So a dynamic surface is basically anything that causes movement throughout the joint that we're using. I can do something with a physio ball. It's a very dynamic surface because it just wants to roll away from me. Or I can do something like a foam pad. Those are usually a little bit more basic, and depending on how dense it is how difficult it's going to be. This particular foam pad that I have, it's about 2 inches thick. I bought it on Amazon a long time ago, so I want to say between $10 and $20. There is a brand name called Airex that is much softer. It has more give to it, so it gives a more dynamic surface for your activities than this does. This, to me, doesn't give a whole lot of challenge because it's a fairly stable surface because of how dense the foam is. But it is a little bit harder than doing the squats on the ground directly. So if you don't feel like buying a pad, what you can do is take a couple of old pillows. I say old pillow, a couple of them, because it tends to be very flat. So ideally I want to have about that 2 inches of dynamic surface. If the pillows are sliding against one another, you might want to just tape them together. But otherwise, you basically just want something that's going to have a little give underneath your feet. That makes it a little bit more difficult. You can get very fancy in your equipment and use something like a Bosu. This is a much more expensive piece of equipment. This I love because it's very versatile in all sorts of different things that I can use it for. For this, it has 2 surfaces. So one surface is almost like a half of a physio ball. I find this to be a slightly easier surface to do my squats on. It has a lot of give to it, but the bottom is flat. So it means that while the ball surface is moving a lot, the whole thing doesn't. So to me, this is easier. Other people find it the opposite, that they find the flat surface to stand on to be the easier surface. Everybody has their preference. and it may just be where your balance is, what's a challenge to you. Like if you have more problems in your ankle, then you might have more of a problem with the more dynamic surface under your feet versus a more stable surface under your feet. For me, I don't have problems with my ankle, so I find this to be more of a challenge because as I shift my weight, it's going to shift left, right, forward, and back. So I have to work throughout the squat to make sure that I keep my feet level. And I do a lot of my exercises facing a mirror so that I can watch in the mirror the entire way and make sure that, first of all, my form stays good, and also, again, that feet position, I want to make sure that I'm not letting the Bosu tilt too much. So that's what I usually do with the Bosu. I do have a more simple, much cheaper product that I bought on Amazon as well before I bought my Bosu. It is a very small surface to balance on, and just a plastic ring that you're going to be standing on. It is a similar level of difficulty in that when you're standing on it, it's going to want to move underneath your feet, and you have to work a little bit harder on this particular one because if you let it get too far out of control, you very quickly end up having the surface touch the ground. And again, I want to be able to keep that very level. So I almost find I need a little bit more control through my ankle to be able to keep this level than I do necessarily the Bosu. Again, I got this, I think it was about $20 on Amazon versus the Bosu, which is about $150. So you don't necessarily have to go very expensive to still get yourself a nice increase in the difficulty. So there are other ways. You can use something like the physio ball. You can do split squats. You can do single leg squats. Again, you're going to end up working a slightly different muscle group or a different part of your quadricep muscles when you're doing those.